Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Get connected, Fitchburg. Sign up for Fitchburg Connect, the city's monthly e-newsletter that keeps you informed about all the events, services, and updates that matter to you. Get it in your inbox once a month. Sign up today to get Fitchburg Connect.
The meeting of the Committee of the Whole on August 26, 2026 at 6:32 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Next item is the approval of minutes. Can I get a motion on the July?
Actually, roll call first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Misty. Can you please do roll call for us?
Absolutely. Rada Frada? Oh, here. Dantzler Jr. is not here. Alder Gerhart?
Here.
Herbst is not here. Jetzer?
Here.
Latisse?
Here.
Lepper?
Here.
Maldonado is not. And Riegstead.
Here.
Joe Maldonado is absent with excuse. For the other two, we don't have any. Did you receive anything? No. Yeah.
I can check. Okay.
No, I want to be sure.
So noted.
Great. Next, but we do have quorum. Next item of business is the draft minutes of the July 22nd, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting. Can I get a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Jetzer, second by Latisse. Comments or questions? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers and no one online to speak, so we can move on to our agenda items. Just one agenda item today, discussion on municipal budgeting and budget priorities, and we'll kick it off with our Finance Director, Misty Dodge.
Thank you so much. So first, I want to say thank you for letting me bump this back to the August meeting. I do have some actual numbers from the Department of Revenue that I can share with you, so I hope that you'll get a little bit more out of this presentation as far as going into the 27 budget than maybe I would have had a month ago. So thank you again for your time. The purpose of tonight's meeting is really to provide that context so that you can go into the 2027 budget process, knowing the terminology, knowing where we stand, knowing how the process works, all of that stuff. I am not going to get into the prioritization that needs to happen. I'm not going to get into the mayor's decisions as she's putting together her proposed budget that will come out in about a month. I am strictly talking about kind of logistics and facts. So just to lay that out there. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how property tax bills are calculated. I know we get this question a lot, especially in years where we do a reval. This year we are doing a maintenance year, so it'll be a little bit easier to kind of explain how changes impact a property tax bill. But I still would like to talk a little bit, at least, just to regroup about how that process works, big picture wise. And then there's 5 budget constraints that we need to kind of pay attention to as we go into the budget process. The first, and what I would consider maybe one of the most important, is your taxpayer ability and willingness to pay. Property taxes is imposed, and so you are making the choice on how much those property taxes are. There's also an optional program, the Expenditure Restraint Incentive Program. This one is optional. We'll talk a little bit about how it's calculating that stuff. But we do historically try to qualify for that. We'll also talk about maintenance of effort, financial guidelines and levy limits. We will talk about structural deficits. You know I love to talk about structural deficits. And then we'll talk about some structure changes and then what the process looks like.
And Misty, are you okay with questions throughout, or would
Absolutely,
you prefer?
yes,
Okay.
please.
And just for the committee, since I take notes and I might not notice you, feel free to jump in. Same goes for online. Feel free to jump in with a question if I don't see you.
I'll jump in right now. Just could you reiterate, when we do a maintenance year, how are properties reassessed, if at all? Is it like, do we look at the ratio and bump everybody up by the same amount, and then if you sell or you pull a permit, you get reassessed, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the city assessor, of course, would be the more expert in that area. But when we do a maintenance assessment, anybody that has a property that nothing happened to it should almost always have the exact same assessment. So the ones where your assessment would change would be you pull a permit, you demo something, things like that. A property splits, right? Stuff like that would happen. But if there's no changes to your property, your assessment should be the exact same. I guess one weird exception would be manufacturing properties, because manufacturing assess it at the equalize and then the ratio does kick in, but there aren't that many of those properties. Does that help? Perfect. I do have a couple of slides of glossary of terms. I'm not going to go through these necessarily, but I thought because I do tend to use a lot of jargon, I try to describe them, but thought this might be a good place to have some high-level terms for you. And then I have some statistics that I want to talk about. So this slide is based just on last year's budget. When we talk about years, the budget year is a year later than the tax roll year, right? So this is the 2026 adopted budget, which would have been the 2025 tax bills that went out. So property value as of 1/1/25, tax bills for 25, that issued in 25, and then that first installment is not due until 26 to fund the 2026 budget. So there's that year kind of lag there. So whenever I talk about years, you want to know, are we saying budget year or are we saying tax roll year? Because those are different. So looking at the 2026 budget, our tax rate for assessed value was $5.4236 per $1,000 of assessed value. This was a decrease of 6.44% from the year before. That makes sense because we did not have a maintenance year that year and a lot of property value went up. So that means your tax rate goes down. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in a bit. Again, last year's budget, we had a 2.46% increase in the overall tax levy that the city collects. That's all of the property tax money that I collect to fund the city functions. That's the tax levy. And then because of that tax rate, the city taxes on the average home was $2,737 for last year. The general fund budget was $37.1 million. All funds together was about $48 million. I'll remind everyone that the property tax bill does come out from the city, but only 31.9% of that dollar is actually retained by the city for city functions or TID functions. The rest of it I share with the other overlying jurisdictions. And then we did add that $40 vehicle registration fee, new of last year. We thought it would hit about $1 million, and that's right, we're right on track for being able to collect for transportation purposes. Now, looking forward to the 2027 budget, again, we're very early in the process. We do not have a document that's out there, so don't feel like you missed anything. But I wanted to provide some statistics of what you can expect when that document comes out. So the Department of Revenue did release their values. So equalized values, TID values, net new construction, all of that was released on August 1st and finalized on August 15th. So the city's TID in equalized value is $7 billion. So it crossed that threshold. It was a 4.4% increase. If you look at the TID out equalized value, it was $6.51 billion, which is a 3.6% increase. And then the difference between those two is how much equalized value is within our TIDs as the increment, and that's $491 million and a 17.9% increase. So you can see a lot of our growth is because of the economic tools that we've been using within our TIDs. DOR also releases our net new construction. This number is important because it's what the bulk of our levy limit constraints are based on, is net new construction. So during the construction year of 2025, we had $173 million worth of new value constructed. So this is not market appreciation. This is new buildings being built, less any buildings that were demolished. So that new construction was the $173 million, which worked out to 2.58%. Now that is important to us too, because we think about how much we're allowed to increase the revenue that the city brings in, or for our primary source of revenue, is restricted primarily by net new construction. CPI-U, which is the one that's used for expenditure restraint, is projected to be at 3.2%. So you can see there's already a gap built there. If CPI-U was a perfect inflation assumption, there'd already be a gap there. But then on top of that, a lot of our costs go up even more than that. So again, we'll talk about it more in a bit, but wanted to hit those numbers. And then for debt service, we are at the very early stages of issuing our debt for 2026. We expect that it'll be about a 6% increase in the tax levy for debt service. So not all of the levy, just the levy that's for debt service. I expect to be a 6% increase. That sale day is in October. So what that means, if the council chooses to levy up to the full amount that I think the council will be able to choose to levy up to, it would be about a 3.4% increase in the total property tax levy for the city. That would be an assessed value rate of $5.49. And the average home, which is still that same $504,700 because we're a maintenance year, the average home taxes would be $2,772. And then the equalized tax rate I put on here too, that would be $5.20. This number is important because of the expenditure restraint threshold, which we'll talk to in a bit, but we have to have a tax rate over 5 mils. And so I do think that we will for this budget. So I expect that we will continue to qualify for that program with this budget. So why the city does a budget? At our heart, we are a service provider. So what our budget does is it says these are what the city's priorities are. You know, we're putting money to work on those services that our community receives from the city, and that has a cost to it. So the first step is figuring out what those costs are. Then we will figure out what other aids or other payments we might have coming in, whether that's shared revenue, fees for services, investment income, all of those other things help pay for those costs to provide the services to our community. And whatever that difference is, that's what we need to fund with property taxes. And so by setting this budget, we are saying how much in property taxes are we going to collect from all of the property owners in our community, as well as how are we going to spend that money as well as the other money that the city has. So that's why we go through this process, and I do tend to think that it's an exceptionally important process because it demonstrates for the community what the city is going to do in the coming year. I have a slide in here about governmental accounting is different. So people that do have an accounting background, the budget document might be a little confusing because we have our funds, which are like mini businesses that we account for, and we move money between the funds. We don't report fixed assets the same way that traditional accounting would. We don't report debt the same way that traditional accounting would. So there's some things that we just do differently, and it's because we have a different focus. Our focus is not on profit, right? Our goal is not to collect more in taxes than what we need. Our goal is ultimately to break even and to provide services. So that's why we have that different perspective. Speaking of all those funds, those kind of mini businesses or mini sets of books that we keep track of, there's a handful of different categories that money is kept track in. So there's the general fund, which is the primary fund for the city. This is where most of our operations are held. So general government, public safety, public works, senior center, parks, economic development, planning, a bulk of what we do is in the general fund from an operating perspective. We also have a handful of actually more than a handful, we have probably a dozen special revenue funds. This would include things like the library that has kind of special statutory powers on how they decide how to spend their money. The vehicle registration fee is in a separate fund because we have very restrictive ways that we can spend that money. Grants we have in a separate fund, again, just to help us track and make sure that we're spending the grant money in the way that we were directed to. CEDA, refuse, park fees. There's a lot of different special revenue funds. And so the reason we have those separated out is so that we can look at, what the financials are for that particular function, and be able to run reports, look at trends, and just demonstrate very clearly that we're spending the money in the way that we're allowed to spend the money under those rules. We also have one debt service fund. This is the fund where we levy money and then get some other revenues in order to pay the principal and interest payments on our debt for each year. Then we have a bunch of capital projects funds. The main one would be the main capital project fund. That's where the bulk of the CIP projects all flow through. And we separate that out because that is, it's more project-based, right? Where your operating is more or less the same each year as far as what your status quo expenses are going to be with some inflation factor. But capital can really swing widely. One year we're building a police facility and the next year we're maybe not doing as much in capital. So we put that in a separate fund so that it doesn't kind of mess with the trends and mess with the accounting of our normal quote unquote operations. We also have all of our TIDs in separate funds. So each TID is a separate fund because we have to track all of that and spend all of that just on the TID that it's for. We also have 3 enterprise funds. So enterprise funds are much more like that traditional accounting that we talked about before. They are on full accrual accounting. They are designed to collect user fees and to make enough money to take care of the system. So these would be our 3 utilities, our enterprise, the water utility, the sewer utility, and the stormwater utility. All 3 of them are in their own fund, but we do track them separately. So then when we collect, say, stormwater user fees, that money is only spent on stormwater purposes. So again, just a way for us to demonstrate very clearly that we're doing what we're supposed to do. And then we also have 2 internal service funds. So internal service funds are, think of it kind of like administrative costs that we want to allocate back out. So we have 2, one for technology, one for insurance. I pay for all of the technology stuff out of the technology fund, all of the insurance stuff paid out of the insurance fund. But how they get that money to pay those bills is by charges to all of the other departments. And it's done by a variety of different drivers, depending on what the specific line item is. But it's a way to, so then when we have to pay Microsoft, for example, I just pay Microsoft with one account number, as opposed to having to split it to 30 different account numbers. So it's kind of an accounting function to make that a little easier. Looking at where the city spends its money. So this chart here is just all of the levy funds. So only the funds that have property taxes in them. That would be the general fund, the library fund, the debt service fund, the capital projects fund, and there's one more that I'm blanking on. So just those ones. The bulk of that money is spent on public safety. That's the largest category at 37%. And then if you look at kind of the class of spending, 62% of our budget is on personnel. And again, that makes sense because we are a service provider at the heart of what the city does.
Can I interrupt super quick?
Please do.
I could look this up too, I suppose, but where do we compared to some of the other municipalities in regards to our percentage of our budget that's spent on public safety?
Yeah, I don't have that right at my tips, but there is information available at the Department of Revenue website that I can look that up, and we can pick particular municipalities that we want to compare to, or just Dane County, that type of thing. I can send you that link for sure.
I can also do my own digging. I don't need you to do my work for me, but I appreciate it.
Problem.
So Jake, there's a wonderful data set on the DOR's website that has revenues and expenses for all sorts of categories for every municipality in the state. They are, however, a couple years behind. So like right now, the most recent year they've got, I think, is 2024. But you can get the data going back 5 or 6 years, so you could plot a trend line with all of the cities in Dane County, for instance, to see where everybody lines up.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I would add it's all through Tableau, and so they can also do a bunch of graphs for you based on how you want to do it. And as far as the timing, our reports were due July 31st, so I suspect the 25 data should be uploaded soon if it's not already.
It's typically January 1st when you
get... Of the 2 years?
Yeah.
Interesting. And then looking at where the city receives our money. So this is just the general fund, that main primary operating fund of the city. 59% of the money that comes into that fund to pay our bills is from property taxes. So here in Wisconsin, we are very property tax heavy for local government. And then as I alluded to earlier, if you look at the full property tax bill that we collect in the finance department, only 31 cents of that actually goes to the city of Fitchburg or stays with the city of Fitchburg. And you can see the pennies underneath it, kind of what different categories that all goes into, the bulk being public safety. Another way to look at our budget is the city taxes on an average home. This is usually an easier way to kind of compare how things have changed over the years, because if you look at just raw dollar values, it can be a little misleading. So we look at that average home. The single family average home is on the left and the multifamily is on the right. We just started tracking what the average multifamily unit was, which is why we haven't built out so many years of data. And then this is our property tax levy history. And you can see on the right what our increases have averaged per year for kind of each one of those big buckets as well as overall. So overall, our property tax levy has increased 5.8% per year on average. General fund 5.9, debt service 5.1, capital projects 16.5, and library 4.8. I included this slide too about tax incremental financing. I don't plan to talk about it too much, but I thought that this visual that the DOR put out a couple years ago was just really helpful to kind of explain how that works. So I want to just get that on your guys' radar again, if you wanted to look at that. So how property tax bills are calculated. So again, back to the numbers that I'm sure you're the most interested in. Looking at the rates, the average homes, and the tax burden for last year's budget. We went through all of those already. And then also for this coming budget, if we do levy up to that full amount I expect. So the tax rate would go up 7 cents. There'd be no change in the average home because it's a maintenance year. And so that increase would be $35 annually or $3 a month on the average home. Again, if the council chooses to levy the most that I think you're able to. So as you can see, that gap between net new construction, how much you're allowed to increase taxes versus what inflation and the new services you want to provide is not keeping up. But the $35 seems more than reasonable if you ask me.
That's like 1.5%.
Yep. So how property taxes are calculated, and again, I'm going to kind of do a big picture formula and there's lots of nuances, of course, because there's always nuances to things. But big picture wise, one of the big questions we get from property owners, especially in a market reval year, is my property value went up 20%, and so now they're terrified that their property tax bill is also going to go up 20%. And in a reval year, that's not generally accurate, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But first, let's talk about how that tax bill is calculated. So I like to think of it with the analogy of baking a chocolate layer cake. So the first step when I'm figuring out how much those property tax bills are going to be is first I have to make the cake layers themselves. So I get what the city needs to collect for our budget. I get what each one of the school districts need to collect for their budgets from our property owners, the county, the school district. I get all of those big numbers, and those are my kind of layers in my chocolate cake. Then we apply the TID increment. So the TID properties, or the properties within the TIDs, pay the same tax rate as everybody else. It's just the money that's collected gets diverted over to the TID fund to pay TID project costs. So it's kind of like frosting the cake. So you've got your layers of your budget money, and then the TID money is kind of on top. And then the step that property owners care a lot about is how much their particular piece is. And their particular piece of that cake that I've now put together is dependent on assessed value. So if they are 1% of the city's total assessed value, they will get 1% of that cake that we just made. And so you look at the example of year 1 to year 2, and there was a 20% increase in your property value, but everybody else's values also went up 20%. This property is still 0.03% of the city overall, and they're assuming there's no change in how much money needs to be collected, so the cake itself is still the same. that property tax bill will not change as long as their value is aligned with how much property values go in total. I also included a couple other references in here. So the DOR puts out a really great guide for property owners. This talks about this process overall, how people can dispute their assessed value if they wanted to, how everything works. It's a really well done publication. And then the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel had an investigation. It's quite a few years old now at this point, but talks about the trouble with taxes is the title. And it talks about why that uniformity clause in assessment is so important and how we don't just chase the values from whatever sales may have happened, because uniformity is the key to that. Also included a relatively new guide that was put out, again, to help property owners understand the property tax system and how things are calculated, what a reval does, all of that. So this is also a really helpful, more digestible guide than listening to me speak. Budget constraints. There's a handful of them. So first, of course, is the taxpayer ability and willingness to pay. And I'll remind that 31% of that tax bill is actually city, so that's the part that you guys actually have control over. You do not have control over the other 69% of what that tax bill is, just this piece. The optional expenditure restraint program, it's not expected to be a concern with the 2027 budget. This time last year, I was nervous that our equalized value tax rate was going to fall below 5 mils. We are now expected to be about $5.20. So I do still think that we'll qualify for the program. We don't know how much that means as far as payment through the program, but I do expect that we'll still qualify. The other component of it is limiting our spending. We protected $5 million worth of capacity last year with the budget, and so there's no way that that will become a concern for us. So we definitely should qualify for the expenditure restraint program, incentive program this year with this budget. But again, I don't know how much that would be until everything shakes out.
And for the new alders, just in case this hasn't sunk in yet, we don't spend it the same year that we get the money. So we bring in ERIP, and then we spend it the following year so that we're never spending money that we don't have. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yep. And so that as this has been phasing out, we've been giving ourselves some time to figure out what our strategies are going to be. Yep.
Misty?
Yeah.
Can you explain your fourth bullet point? It says beginning in 2030, the 2028 budget, 2027 tax roll will no longer be eligible.
Yep. So similar to how this year I thought we were going to fall below the 5 mil rate tax rate. Next year, assuming equalized values continue to go up, the housing market continues to accelerate more than levy limits, my guess is we'll fall below that $5 threshold. And once you fall below $5, you're just not eligible anymore, regardless of what you do with your spending.
So so it says beginning in 2030, even though it's for the 2028 budget with taxes collected in 2027.
Yep. So that goes back to Alder Gerhardt's point. So the 2028 budget is when I suspect we will not qualify. So we probably will not get a payment in 2029. And so then we will not apply it to capital in 2030.
Okay. So that's the 2-year gap. Okay.
Yep.
Do you expect, you already answered that you don't know, but do you expect that your estimate that was in the CIP, I think it was like $200,000, do you think that is in line with what we would expect to get?
Still unclear.
Okay.
I hope that would be the lowest amount. Not
Okay.
hope. My guess is that would be the lowest amount that we could expect, because it all depends on what other municipalities are doing too.
Sure. Can you, I don't want you to spend too much time on this. Can you explain what the thought process was when setting up this program, maybe way back, as to why it has anything to do with tax rates and kind of how that has affected people's ability to qualify for the program and why that all makes sense? I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. So I was not around when this was first established. It's been around for decades. But my understanding is that it was designed to be just for those much larger municipalities, to incentivize them to hold the line on their spending. I'll say the formulas and the program and all the nuances have made it not meet those goals necessarily as well as what they originally planned. And there's definitely some conversation happening that maybe this program should be revamped, maybe it should go away, maybe it should just turn into shared revenue. Like maybe there's another way that we could do this that doesn't have as many perhaps unintended consequences and as many nuances to it.
Do you know why? The part I don't understand is, so holding line on spending, but then as your tax rate decreases, you stop qualifying for the program. Like, wouldn't that be seen as a positive, technically, if your tax rate was decreasing?
Yes, in many respects.
Okay.
And again, they were just trying to get to those high service, larger cities
Okay,
were
so
the ones that they were trying to.
The way they said that was in
incentivize.
order to target larger cities with higher. Okay, that makes sense now. Okay.
Yeah.
They just so.
Yep. And I guess just to expand on that a little bit, so cities generally will have a higher tax rate than, say, towns and villages. So there's not as many towns and villages in this program as what there are cities. So it really targets that group as well.
That makes sense now.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I know we kind of beat this to death at the CIP time, but the one big black mark we have in our budget is that structural deficit in the CIP, where we are relying on this expenditure restraint program and fund balance to backfill it up to the $650,000 a year. And so we have mitigated it for a few years. We have enough to kind of keep us going, but that's not a long-term wise strategy. So that's something that hopefully we can work together to reduce that reliance on fund balance and reduce our reliance on this program so that we can not have that big structural deficit. So the ERIP program, it is a state aid payment. So if we qualify, we get money from the state. So it is a payment that we get in that we then apply to our capital purchases. But we do have to stay within those couple of things. So we do have to restrain our spending, which is a strategy. So I mentioned we protected $5 million worth of our capacity last year. So there's a strategy that we've been building in to kind of protect that because of the nuances of the formula and how the aid program works. But if we did go over that, we could fall out of the program. And then also if your rate goes below the 5, you would fall out of the program. And if your rate goes below or your spending is too high, it's not that you will phase it out like some of the other programs that are there. It's just you don't get anything that year anymore. So it's an all or nothing. The only calculation would be how much of that program aid you're going to get if you qualify.
So if nothing were to change with this program, municipalities would continue dropping out of it, and the dollar amount is not affected by the number of municipalities. It's just that the remaining municipalities then would get a larger share of those dollars. So eventually we'd have like one city get all of it, and then the next year they get nothing.
So there'll always be somebody that qualifies, right? So, but you're exactly right. And I have that on my next slide. So last year, I heard from the Department of Revenue that a third of the communities that qualified for the program didn't anymore, simply because of that tax rate drop. So here in Dane County, our values are continuing to increase much faster than, say, other areas of the state. So here in Dane County in particular, communities are falling out of that program. The exception would be if they have a referendum that was approved that can kind of surpass what levy limits might constrain them for, or other significant changes like that. But yeah, there's a lot of incentive for the big ones that can stay in there longer to keep that program around. But then there's people like us and other communities like us that would like that to be redeployed in a different way. And so exactly to your point, so the state puts together a pool of ERIP funding. So they're going to give out X dollar amount, and I don't have that number at my fingertips. Any municipality that qualifies for the program, meets those two tests, are eligible to get a payment. And then how they decide how much your payment is how much your tax rate is over that 5 mils. So if there's a community that has a tax rate that's much over 5 mils and it results in a much larger tax levy, they would get a larger payment of that pool of money. But that pool of money has not changed in many years. So as those people fall out, yes, that's how we get more of that money. And Fitchburg has benefited from that too. I mean, we were at 200,000-ish in ERIP 10 years ago, and then it jumped up to the 600,000, and then now we're kind of going back down. So the way that those aid amounts change would be you don't qualify anymore. And I'll remind everyone it is the equalized value tax rate, not the assessed value tax rate. So that's a bit of a nuance. And then as other communities fall out, or as our tax rate doesn't grow as fast as other communities' tax rates, that might impact how much money we receive too. And that could be either from equalized values increasing much faster or our spending not increasing as fast as the other municipalities. Next budget constraint is the maintenance of effort. So in 2023, when we got that historic increase in state shared revenue, and the city definitely benefited from that program, one of the hooks was this new maintenance of effort requirement that we have to follow. So for our police service, we have to certify and maintain at least one of those 3 bullets. And for our fire and EMS services, we have to meet at least 2 of the 4 there. Doesn't seem like it's too hard, but I'll say, of course, there's some nuances there too. For example, on both of them, it's the number of officers or firefighters or EMS personnel that are employed, not how many you are budgeted for. So if you are trying to hire people and for whatever reason are not successful and you have a huge vacancy, how much you actually spent on people might not be as much as the year before if you had a big drop in staffing. Again, no fault of your own. You tried, you budgeted, it's there, but you weren't able to find the people. So that could become a problem. Here in Fitchburg, we have very much so been investing in our public safety, so that hasn't been a problem, but it is something that we need to kind of keep tabs on as we put together the budget.
Misty?
Yeah.
So that said, shared revenue supplemental aid. There are multiple flavors of shared revenue. So supplemental aid is one of those, and that's the only one that requires this maintenance of effort, right?
Yep. So supplemental aid is just that new aid that we received a couple years ago. So we have the kind of traditional county and municipal aid that we've had for a long time. There's a utility aid that we receive as part of that. The expenditure restraint, a lot of people consider that to be shared revenue. And then the supplemental aid was the new stuff. Mm-hmm. And it is just a 1-year penalty. So like, let's say, I don't know, something catastrophic happens and we fall below that threshold, we would get hit with that penalty. But then the next year, if we're back up to kind of where we should have been or some sort of an increase, we would be able to go back into that supplemental aid program. So it's not a permanent penalty.
Logan has his hand up. Logan?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just really quickly here, do we have the ability to choose every year which of those criteria we want to go with? If there were to be an issue where we ran low on number of FTE of firefighters, could we say for this year we are choosing a different one and then choose a different one the year after? Or do we kind of lock ourselves in and say these are the 2 or the 1 for the police that we're going to go with, and that is kind of our ride or die, if you will?
Yeah, great question. So we can choose which of the ones we want to qualify with for that particular year. And I work really closely with the chiefs to select which one that we want to choose in that particular year. Because while we are able to swap kind of between the 3, how you calculate it the first time you take it is set in stone then that way forward. So we want to kind of keep as much flexibility as we can. So we certify that we met the minimum and then allow ourselves flexibility in the future.
One extra question on this. The 15% penalty if you fail to comply, is that 15% of the supplemental revenue that was given or the entirety of the intergovernmental aid?
I believe it's just the supplemental, but I can follow up to be sure.
It's okay. I'm just curious because I would
Sure.
assume it would just be the supplemental because if it was 15% of your entire shared revenue, that would be a huge hit versus just the increase. Well, that would still be a huge hit.
Yeah, so our supplemental is actually more than, I think, our original aid, if not similar. So
yeah,
it would
it was
still
like
be
800
a huge,
some, and
yes.
before it was 600 some.
Something like that, yeah. It'd be a significant impact for sure. And again, I don't think it's a problem, especially not for this coming budget that we're about to go into, but just wanted to make sure it's on everybody's radar. We also have our financial guidelines that were most recently adopted by Council in May of 2025. I went through all of the guidelines, why we have them, what the status was at the May Committee of the Whole. So if you're interested in those, I would encourage you to watch that meeting instead. And then levy limits. So levy limits is by far our biggest constraint. I will try not to get on my soapbox on why I think municipalities should be able to do what their community requests of them. And apparently that was my soapbox right there. So levy limits. So levy limits is a state statute. The state has decided for all towns, villages, cities, and counties how much they can increase their property tax levy. And the bulk of that increase is based on net new construction. So it's there's no floor. So there are some municipalities that either aren't growing or maybe had things go down. And so there is no floor. It would be a 0%. I guess there is a floor. The floor is 0%. So if there's a negative, yes, you can at least levy how much you did the year before, but there's no floor above that. When levy limits were first introduced, there was a higher floor to kind of account for some amount of inflation, and that number has kind of bounced around a little bit. But in the last over 10 years now at this point, it's been 0% or net new construction is the primary basis of it. And that is brand new taxable value, so brand new buildings. It does not count nonprofit buildings. It does not count city buildings because those are not taxable. It does not count just appreciation in everybody else's homes or properties. It's just new things that are being built. And then it is reduced by anything that's demolished. So this one is really only applicable if you think of the Bowman Plaza building that we're building now. So that the developers are building now. They're demolishing the current Bowman Plaza and they're going to build a new thing. It's just the difference between the value of those two that will go towards our new construction or net new construction.
Misty?
Yeah.
So given that from year to year, our equalized value can go up by $1 billion.
Yep.
What's the denominator? Like for the net new construction, is that like actual dollars spent with no inflation adjustment across the year? And then what is the divisor, I mean?
Yeah. So the first formula would be how you get to that percentage. And so it's how much in value of the net new construction it was. And it was that 172 million, I think, from the earlier slide. And then it's divided by your TID in equalized value from the year before. So it takes quite a bit of new buildings for us to even hit the 2.5 that we have gotten the last couple of years. So that is the first step. And then from there, when you're doing the levy limit worksheet, the levy that we collect less the personal property aid and less the debt service adjustment, that 2.5% is applied to that amount. And then those other things are added back on. So it's that 2.5% from that you calculate through net new construction is based on the levy that you collect. Does that make sense? Did I answer that? Okay. There are definitely some flaws in this system. The biggest one, of course, being that inflation is not factored in. The city experiences inflationary pressures just as much as every home and business does, but there's no accommodation for that in the levy limit statute. And then unlike ERIP, which is optional, levy limits are mandatory. So even if there was a decision to exceed levy limits, which you could in theory do, right? You could pass a resolution, you could set a property tax levy that exceeded levy limits. That is mechanically something that you could do, but there's a dollar for dollar penalty out of our state shared revenue to make up that difference. And it carries over from now until forever, until that money is paid back. So while mechanically you could exceed levy limits, practically that is not an option because there's a dollar for dollar penalty. And so this is where that seesaw comes in. So levy limits, we, in many respects, are really grateful for the 2.6% that we got compared to other municipalities. We are far exceeding the state average if you look across the state. So that's how much we're allowed to increase the amount of money that we collect. But if you look at the expenditure side of it, CPIU is at 3.2%. There's additional inflationary pressures. CPI-U is not perfect. Also, the city has other things that are subject to inflationary pressures beyond that. And then also that new growth, those new buildings that created that 2.5% net new construction, they're going to want services. And so there's no way on top of that to also provide services to those properties that created that increase in values. So it's this really lopsided seesaw, and is how we got to that referendum conversation a couple years ago. So this is where it's continuing to be a problem. So I have this chart here. So even if you assume 2 to 3% of net new construction, you assume a 3% just general inflation, which again is not our general experience, but we just assume that as kind of a floor. Personnel is likely to be closer to a 5% increase. So when you average that out with how much of our budget that goes to personnel at that higher increase versus other costs, our average is a 4.4% increase per year. And if net new construction is coming in at 2.5% per year, you can see how that gap really, really quickly starts to widen.
And Misty, I think it's important to point out, when you say personnel increases like 5%, nobody's getting a 5% raise. This is all health insurance and whatever else, right? I mean,
Yep. So the last couple of budgets, we've had a 2% cost of living included, and then a 1% merit base. But then the bigger piece of it, yes, health insurance usually goes up 8% or so. Dental insurance, 5 to 6%. WRS rates go up, but then also the amount that we pay to WRS is more as wages increase. So it's, and that is also just the status quo personnel. This is not new people to service the growing community. This is just, continuing to pay for the staff that we currently have with benefits and wages. There's a couple other flaws in levy limits that I just wanted to mention real quick. And I know I talked about the ones a lot already, but it also does not include those tax-exempt properties. So again, those tax-exempt properties are probably also going to expect services from the city, but because that value is not taxable, it's not included in our net new construction, and then is not allowing us to increase taxes to pay for those services. And then similar to any property that is assessed by the state as a manufacturing property, there's a significant discount when the state values your property versus when we follow the rules that everybody else has to follow. And the value that's included in our net new construction is that lower value that the state assesses. So it's also kind of flawed in that respect. And I included a couple other references in case you're interested. And then structural deficits. So just in general, local government financing in Wisconsin is inherently under a structural deficit model because we have levy limits, because we are so property tax dependent at our level in Wisconsin, and because property taxes don't increase as much as inflationary and other things, we are just inherently under a structural deficit model. And we can't really control that because the levy limit laws are the way that the levy limits laws are, and they don't have inflation. And then a lot of the state aid programs that we do receive are generally flat or relatively modest increases. The benefit of the supplemental aid, shared revenue aid that we got a couple years ago, they did index it to sales tax, which is a huge win. But even that indexing to sales tax is not going to meet our inflationary pressures. And then especially if you look at how much of our budget is personnel and things that have higher inflationary pressures than, say, other things, it's just really hard to keep up. And those are things that we really can't control. Recognizing that just because there's a lot of hopelessness in it doesn't mean that we can just give up, right? There's still things that as a city, we should make sure that we are controlling when we have that option. So there are some structural deficits that we and councils before you have been very diligent and purposeful in making sure to avoid them. So things like using one-time revenues only for one-time expenses. There's a lot of communities that got into trouble using that ARPA money or other things like that for ongoing costs and now have pretty significant budget deficits that they're trying to get out of. And our council, for many, many years, has always been very diligent about not creating that hole. Also, fully funding the cost of a decision rather than focusing on just that 1 year. So, for example, there's communities that might do a mid-year hire. They'll say, well, I can afford 6 months of this position, and then maybe we'll figure it out in the future. And again, councils have always, but here at Fitchburg, have been very good about recognizing that that full cost needs to be planned for. And maybe it's planned for in a little bit creative way, but it still needs to be acknowledged and planned for. And you guys have done a great job recognizing that it's not just that first year. It's every year that things go through. And that could also be like phased in decisions, right? So something that has a smaller cost year 1, but then year 2, year 3 has more, that we plan for those too. Also making sure that there's room available before we do program additions or the mid-year hiring that I talked about briefly. Another great example of this, or maybe it's the next one, ensuring a funding plan is in place prior to approving a future cost. A great example of this one would be when the hub was, or the Hastahochi was built. So the operating costs we knew were coming on, and council planned for that. You made sure that that cost was protected within the levy limits so that you knew that you weren't going to build a building and not be able to operate it. And so those are just financially responsible choices that council has made. And I'll say it's not easy, right? Like financial responsibility is tough, but it's because councils have made those really good decisions coming up now that we have avoided a lot of the huge problems that other municipalities are currently experiencing. And then just the idea of the decisions that you guys make at this council impacts future councils, right? So the past councils have set you guys up for success, and it's important that you guys kind of set up future councils for success too. And so the ways that we have done that also practically would be we do assume full staff levels. We want to make sure that every employee knows that their paycheck will be paid, that it is planned for and it's ready to go. We do reasonable, sustainable building permit and interest revenue expectations. Yes, interest is high right now, but we're not going to expect that to be high for the long run, and we don't want to have a problem with that. And I'll say this one was a lesson learned in Fitchburg 12 years or so ago, where they were budgeting too high for that, and city staff was put on furlough as a result of it. And so that's something that we want to make sure, or has been at least a priority to past councils, to make sure that employees knew that their jobs were financially safe, that they knew that they wouldn't have to go through that. We also have our capital and small equipment replacement funds. We have the new vehicle registration fee, which I realize is controversial, but it is an extra diversified revenue source for us. So it's just a different pool of funding versus relying so heavily on property taxes. And I'll note that Moody's, in our last credit rating, a big part of what they emphasized was our strong budgeting practices, and our proactive budget management is what they credited our AAA credit rating to. So next steps, 2027 operating budget, we are using a very similar approach to other years. So it's kind of like zero-based budgeting, not exactly, but kind of, where it's line item budgeting. So you can see exactly what's included in the request. Many of the forms will look the same as what they have in the past years. I do hope to do budgeting software next year. We need to get payroll done first, since so much of our budget is payroll related. So then once we get that kind of wrapped up, we'll start looking at software. So then at that point, the document will probably look significantly different, but for 2027, it will look very similar. The one big structure change we made is that we were not previously able easily to calculate how much property taxes were needed to run a particular department. So you think of engineering department. So yes, I can tell you exactly how much we spend on public works, but I couldn't tell you in the past how much of each one of those general fund revenues was because of the public works department. So the charges that they send out to developer for engineering, the accident recoveries, when traffic light gets hit and we bill that out to the responsible party. We weren't able to connect those revenues to a department, so I could never really tell you how much property tax levy was needed for that department. And so we are making that change. So we are assigning revenues to departments. And then sometimes if it's a revenue that may have had a bunch of departments feeding into it in the past, you'll see say, 5 lines for it, one for each department separately. So there'll be more account numbers in there than in the past, but it's all the same kind of things. It's just our way to separate it out. And then on the executive summary that I put together, we have that financial summary for each department. I plan to change that a little bit, so you'll see instead the expenditures of the department less the revenues that were assigned to them, and then get to what that net property tax burden is for that particular department. So just to make those connections. Next steps. So the mayor's proposed budget comes out on Friday, September 18th. We have a special finance committee presentation that everybody is welcome to and encouraged to come. It would be Tuesday and Wednesday, September 29th and the 30th. On October 13th, we'll have our first public hearing. This is a regularly scheduled council meeting. This is a chance for the public to weigh in on the mayor's proposed budget. Amendments then are due the next day by noon. So there is a relatively tight turnaround. We would encourage you to reach out to anybody on the staff that could help you put things together or pull numbers or whatever. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. And then that gets posted to the website and shared with everybody in October 22nd and 23rd. The October Committee of the Whole meeting, we talked just about the council proposed amendments. So the intention is that we'll get all of the discussion done at that meeting. So ask as many questions as you have as much discussion as you want, so that you can really understand what the amendment is and why it was being proposed, so that you have the information going into the next meeting, council meeting, where we'll actually vote on the amendments. So the beginning of the council meeting will be another public hearing. The council can weigh in on their thoughts on the council proposed amendments, and then we'll go through each one of the amendments one by one. So it is very similar to what we just did with the CIP. We'll go one by one. You'll make a motion to approve it. You'll share your information. People can ask questions, and then we'll vote on it. Amendments to the amendments are allowed, but new things cannot come off the floor. And the intention of that is we want to make sure the public and everybody knows kind of what's possibly going to be talked about, so that there's no perceived new discussion that people weren't prepared for. So I need to make sure that that's all very transparent. Similarly, so we have the committee of the whole discussion to do all the discussion. The night of the council meeting, there are very strict time limits on it. So each person can only speak a number of times. There's a minute timeline per amendment that you are able to extend, but the hope, of course, is that we will keep it efficient. So the goal is that by the time you get to the council meeting, you more or less know how you're going to vote, because you had all that discussion at a separate public meeting that everybody could watch. So when we get to the floor and ready to vote, we can just kind of get through it, make whatever amendments you want to make, and make whatever votes that you want to make. The one nuance, of course, is because of those levy limits, we do have to make sure we have a budget that meets levy limits. So if we get through all of the amendments, we'll take a pause, and then if we don't meet levy limits at that point, we'll pass a resolution beforehand that will allow us to go back through certain amendments, so that you can still amend amendments to kind of make sure that we have a budget that passes. Still nothing new from the floor, but at the end of the day, regardless of how many passes we have to go through, we really do want to have a budget that meets levy limits. And then there is a mayor veto option that we're not going to talk about because it's not going to happen. I hope. No. Not for the budget. The CIP did. Yeah, but not the budget. And part of that too is I got to get property tax bills out, right? So we're already, it's that first meeting in November when things are happening, and I have to have tax bills out usually in December, which includes getting the information to the county and all of that. So it is a very tight process. I think we would all love to have more time in our days and more time in our weeks and more time in our months to really spend time on it. But because of all the different inputs and the work that goes into it, it is a relatively constrained timeline. But I know we can do it. And so I do have this kind of going into budget questions. We've had this the last several presentations in case you do want to have some conversation about what your priorities might be, if there's new initiatives that you're considering or things that you think we are currently doing that aren't as important that maybe we could deprioritize. You're welcome to have that conversation now here on the public floor. So we'll just open it up.
Thank you so much, Misty. Any final questions for Misty before we go into budget priorities? Seeing none, I wanted to give an opportunity. The Mayor, did you want to say anything to kick us off?
No, I'm going to mention what are my priority for the budget.
Sure.
Before, one of the questions that Misty asked me, maybe in July, is what are your priority for the budget? So my priority for this budget are, of course, is to the 2 firefighter position, to have a 2% COLA for the employees, a 1% was for the, what is it?
The base merit.
Yeah. Maintain the same benefit for the employees. I am also increasing $50,000 more in the legal budget so Valerie can have some assistance because we are growing as a municipality. We have only one attorney, and her workload is increasing drastically, and she needs at least some relief. So having a $50,000 more for outsourced legal services so they can do all the I forgot. I'm sorry.
The municipal court.
The municipal court. So that one is a priority. I also increase, talking to Chief Morales to increase the budget for training for the police department. It's not too much. It's $6,500. Especially we have a new command layer, and they need a lot of training. So what else was?
You'll get another chance once your budget actually gets released to
and we have another
everything.
thing that we are working to. Couple of things that I would like to incorporate, but we are still looking for a budget. But that one is practically, the main priority for now. And with the constraint that we have, my list of priority and things that I want to do could be 10 times bigger, but looking at the constraint, that we have with the levy limits and inflation, all the costs, you will see when the budget is back that there's a lot of technology, repairs vehicles that have increased. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of cost that have increased lately, and they are impacting our budget. So, but this is our the main ones.
Thanks, Mayor. Any discussion from the council?
I need to know what are your priority, guys. And I want to ask you a question to each of you. So, who's going to be first?
Logan.
I was just going to ask a quick follow-up. Do we think that all of those items, Mayor, that you listed off will fit within the 2.58% net new construction?
Yes.
Okay.
There may have to be compromises in other areas, right? So as we talked about, the 2.58 doesn't keep up with inflation. So if we do want to add new things and new priorities, it likely means that there's going to have to be compromises in other areas.
But that one are the thing that I would like, because at the end of the, this is what you need to understand, that the budgets also have to reflect the priority of the community, okay, or the priority that we want to see too. And for and you will see that the budget brings, we're still investing in the H&I, we're investing in personnel, we're investing in retention and training of our people, because at the end of the day, we are a service organization, and, we need to provide an excellent service, and how we're going to do it is we provide the tools, and the resources to the people to do that service, okay? So for me, investing in people is number one. So that one is where I base my budget priority. Okay, so Logan, what is your anything What is your priority? Oh, I don't know. You want to go first?
I suppose so. I guess the first priority would be the long-term sustainable funding for those 2 firefighter positions that we authorized last night. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think even if it wasn't my top priority, I think we obligated ourselves to do it last night with our vote. But again, I was happy to make that vote last night. I would love to see what it would look like to expand 65 and 75 bus route service. And I say that, and also I have significant concerns about not only if that fits within the budget, but also even if we find the money, is it practical given some of the constraints that Metro Transit is having? So, well, I'd like to explore it. I also don't want to commit to it and then we missed out on making another decision and then we have allocated money toward this transit that is not going to happen, for example, which is kind of the situation we found ourselves in this year with the vehicle registration fee, and then the 65 and 75 still don't have the all-day service. So that's something that's, I don't know that I'd say it's a priority, but it is something I've been grappling with quite a bit, and just I don't have a great answer for it as we sit here this evening. I think those are really kind of the 2 things that immediately come to mind that are top of mind for me. And I think just making sure that we are prioritizing those things that we think have the largest impact and make the greatest benefit to the community at large. So if there's programs or services that we offer that aren't, even if they generate a small bit of revenue, if they're only reaching a small population of folks, that might be a place that I'd be wanting to review for potential reprioritization.
So you say programs and services where in which department? In library, recreation?
With library, I don't know if we have a ton of, I guess, say-so as the council because of the way that the statute is set up for the library boards. One area that I would like to explore a little bit is some of our recreation programs. As I can sit here and look at our rec program guide, are some of those programs things that are reaching enough people that we feel that they're worth continuing, even if, again, they are revenue generating. So I think that's one area that I might want to take a look at, not making any promises or guaranteeing that I want to go into anything with a hatchet. But if there are programs that are only reaching maybe 20 people a year, is that something that we want to reevaluate?
Okay, thank you.
Or is it duplicating an effort that one of the school districts is doing or something?
Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. Anyone else would like to?
I would like to
jump
hear
in?
from everyone. So who is next?
Bill.
Bill.
I guess I can jump in. Oh, sorry, Bill.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Who is going? Jake?
Bill, you go. Jake next.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt Bill. Okay.
All right. Well, so I agree, maintaining the 2 firefighter positions that we approved should not be sacrificed. That should definitely, we should definitely keep those positions. I also want to, at the very least, maintain all of our transit. Ideally, we would, expand it, but I don't know that Metro will allow such a thing to happen given their current situation. And then I guess my other item is the CIP amendment that we dropped to do
crisis would be something that I would think is important.
Say wellness opportunity. What do you mean?
I mean, there's tons of different things that come to mind for that. I'm thinking from like my world. I mean, we have everything from offering PT services
Okay.
to
Mental health. Yeah.
meditation space. I know EAP is already a thing, but just some of those other things that can, take some of the stresses off and help retention, I think is important.
Yeah, I think the Chief Server is working on a memorandum of understanding for a new proposal that is going to come soon. So, okay, regarding that. Okay.
I can jump in next. I
Yeah.
like a lot of what's already been shared, and that echo a lot of that. Especially with regard to the firefighters and the public transit, and interested to see if we can do some solar projects as well, if we can find some funding in this current budget to cover that. But the two top things for me, one would be allocating some of the affordable housing fund money to get to work in the community. I really am eager to get some of that money out, and if we can budget it in fiscal year 27, or I mean, I guess if at worst comes to worst, we can budget it next year. But obviously, that's more complicated than doing it through the budget process.
What do you mean allocating?
I mean, we have priorities, right? We've listed the priorities for the different like categories of things that we can do with the affordable housing fund.
They're
money,
working on that. Yes, it's coming.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what that actually looks like, because I want to get more of that money out. And then I've talked to the mayor about this. I've had this like project since basically year one of the council, where I've created the Community Wellbeing Fund, which I just checked. It has $40,000 in it, and it basically diverts like a percentage of the court's penalties and fines revenue stream into that. And the concept behind that for me was always to do what we do with ERIP, but for HNI. And so by that I mean you put money into a fund one year and then you spend it the next year. And my goal was always to divert more of the court fines and penalties revenue stream, because I love the idea of that being invested back into the community to do good things versus it just going into our general fund for different uses. And my goal has always been to increase that percentage going into the Community Wellbeing Fund, such that we could fund the HNI grant program, but also maybe more than that. Like if you had more revenue coming in, then you could choose what to do with that. And when I chose the term Community Wellbeing Fund, it was meant to be broad in nature, because maybe that means planting trees in HNI neighborhoods. Maybe that means it could be a ton of different things. But that if we had the funding stream available, and a funding stream that wasn't property tax based, but that was coming from a different source, that's always been a priority for me. So finding a way to get more money into that fund, and the fact that we are kind of taking a pause here on the grant funding and just doing a more constrained version, and maybe we'll even have the amount of money that we're planning to spend in the Community Wellbeing Fund by the end of this year. Maybe there's an opportunity to do that next year. Obviously, that's a more complicated strategy if the mayor wants to include that in your initial budget proposal. But I think allocating a percentage of the fines and forfeitures revenue stream is important, because we typically budget conservatively, but we typically bring in a lot more revenue than we budget for. So a percentage going into that fund is going to generate more money than just the pure dollar amount allocated. So because we budgeted we budgeted a little over 200,000 this year, for example, and we've already brought in, as of the end of May, 129,000. So 64% of what we budgeted came in by the end of May. So presumably we're going to go over that 200,000. We'll see what happens, but that's what's happened in many other years. But anyway, that's very in the weeds. But that was when I first created that fund back in, I think it was in 2020. That was always my vision for it. But it takes time to get there, and obviously we have a lot of needs that are urgent.
What is the current? It's a 7%, isn't it?
I don't remember exactly. It's in the budget document, though.
It was 12, and last year, it went down to 7.
Yeah, it's gone up and down over the years.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Okay, I can go.
Yeah.
I'll echo some of the other things that we said. Obviously, fire staffing, we're all on board with that. I do think we are going to have a conversation amongst all of us about sustainable transportation funding. I think everyone's kind of aware of what's going on with Metro. So that's maybe not something specifically for this budget, but it will be down the road, and we all kind of need to prepare ourselves for that conversation. Generally, I agree very much with the priority of maintaining COLAs and benefit levels for city staff. And I will continue to say over and over again how much it costs the city to lose staff, and how many soft costs are in there as opposed to just the hard costs of that, and the knowledge that goes with that, and everything else. And so we're going to have that conversation again when it comes to renovating this building, and how that contributes to the city staff's day-to-day lives. And so just maintaining those levels, I think, is really important. And then if I was going to say one fun thing, things around building community within the city, I think would be a priority of mine. And these are things that can be done, I think, at low cost, because I think at this point, everything that we are saying we'd like to do needs to be at low cost. And so whether that is like supporting neighborhood associations in the city, or having more events in the parks, or taking like the major events we have like at Agora and expanding them, or doing more things, or working with partners to make them larger. And there might not be as much financial cost to doing some of those things. And I feel like maybe the budget aspect of that is staff having to prioritize kind of those events over other things. And that's not a monetary budget, but it is a resource budget, and it might affect other things that are part of the monetary budget. But just, in general, the category would be like building community among the city.
Donald.
I'm similar to what everybody else has been discussing, but basically just keeping into lockstep with, of course, transportation. And one thing I wanted to talk about at some point where we do just even working with Jill and the folks at the senior center around some of our transportation option available for our seniors to some of our programming that may not have the type of insurance that would provide them the rides from their residence to the senior center. And just looking at kind of how we can balance some of those are some of the conversations we've been having a lot of and talking about with the Friends of the Center. And then also just our connectedness within the city, given that we are growing and becoming somewhat disjointed depending on which part of the city you live in, and making sure folks can be able to navigate all aspects of our city, even if it isn't through our bicycles, which is very good and friendly, but not everybody, wants to take that method of transportation, or it might be cold. So making sure folks can do that. And then just continuing with smartly increasing the housing supply that we need, so that we can continue to not only grow our population base, but then also be able to drive down some of those prices as we increase the supply for folks. And then excited about the affordable housing units that we'll be bringing to the city. And then lastly, just to show some support for our public safety officers and folks like that with those 2 positions that we had from the fire department, and make sure that, we don't always agree on everything all the time, but making sure those individuals feel supported throughout the city for the important work they do, and being able to make sure that we have adequate services and things like that for folks when they need them here in the city of Fitchburg as we continue to grow.
Thank you. Okay.
Anybody else wants to share anything before we wrap this conversation? And any final thoughts? Oh, Bill, go ahead.
One other item that I've been thinking about for a couple of years, we don't have a line item in our budget for public art. I feel like if we threw, $10,000 a year into public art, that could make a big difference in how people perceive the city.
Yeah, well.
I 100% agree with that. I've been thinking about that a lot, especially because we've had some things that have come forward with the chamber, but I see it in other cities. I see these public art projects, and I know the city puts at least some finances behind it. Not all of it is city funded, but
That one could be under H&I.
yeah, maybe the community well-being fund could be
yeah.
a part of it, or
Okay.
but there could be other sources too. I mean, I 100% agree.
Anything else? Okay.
for me,
Donald,
no.
go ahead.
Yes, I had one more thing.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, about a year ago or so, last time when we went through this process, you kind of talked to us about different buckets that we fell in around priorities, and we were going to set up like subcommittees and things, or just kind of subgroups for people who have similar interests around some of these topics to get together and strategize and talk, have events and things like that. Are we gonna do that again? I know last time it was somewhat derailed. It was a busy time with the referendum and some of the other things we were doing. But do you anticipate that happening this year as well?
Yeah, I need to rethink that. I would like to do it, but I haven't had the time to put it together. I need to maybe, to determine how to do it. You know what I mean? Yes. But if people are interested in doing that, you can help me to put this together. But yeah.
Okay.
Pausing just for a second to see if anyone else has anything else to add.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. The last one.
Okay, Mary, go ahead.
Okay. Money is not an issue. Okay, suppose that we have plenty of money, 22% net new construction. What you would like to do in the city, or program or service that you see that we are not doing? And you say, I would love the city of Fitchburg to do this, but we don't have the money. But what is that? Just curious. Okay.
For me, I would say like a full-time mental health / outreach team for people who are unhoused or experiencing housing insecurity, like 24 hours a day. They can respond and help people with those sorts of things.
Okay, 24/7. Okay.
Bravo.
I would say CARES team.
Oh,
Stole it from you, Mike.
How dare you?
That's what I mean. That's like what I was
say
kind of
too.
This is what it
referencing,
is.
yeah.
Cares. Okay. Cares. Okay.
Who was
Okay.
gonna get
That
it
one
first?
is going to Jake. Sorry.
I mean, I'll say a teen center.
Oh, a teen center. Yeah, we forgot about teen center.
In conjunction with Gabriella's point with the teen center, just really growing what the city has already started with Youth Government Week, and Alder Maldonado and I kind of talked about this a while ago, like having our youth council and potentially getting that off the ground and being able to engage the youth in Fitchburg in civic engagement and discourse, things like that. So that would be one great thing. And then also, if it wasn't an issue, we had developers who want to do it. Just bringing some more like workforce housing to the city that's nice and feasible for people to be able to afford and move into, I think would be great.
Yeah, I think more robust land banking so that we can control
okay.
development by actually doing
okay.
RFPs. But
one
if we don't
clear.
own the land, it's kind of hard to
Okay.
do that.
Okay, what else?
There's plenty of kind of mundane things that we've just been holding back on, right? I mean, we've never properly funded our road maintenance. We've never given our staff true COLAs. We give them an increase that consistently lags inflation.
Yeah, I know.
So those are a couple of kind of basic things that I would like to see if we had, reasonable levy limits.
Logan?
I think the CARES program would be near the top of my list since that's already been discussed. I think some additional public safety funding would also, in that vein, be helpful. Another thing I think would be nice to see to help us really build that sense of community and home grow the next generation of our businesses would be if we were able to work with private developer that's building a new multi-story building and has the first floor commercial, could we essentially condoize some of that commercial space and then lease it out for a lesser cost to small businesses to help them kind of almost like an incubator, if you will, to get started and then help them move on to a more permanent, long-term, sustainable business option for them within the community.
So like a business incubator.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that one is, I have talked to Mike a lot about that. Okay, good. Okay, who is next?
I'd like to see some sort of, this is going to go off what I said earlier. I'd like to see some sort of larger event in the city.
Like a
I think a
festival.
lot of cities smaller than us, Verona does hometown days.
Yeah.
New Glarus even does like a really cool Christmas market weekend where they have like European style Christmas markets set up. It's incredibly popular. And this is not in any way to diminish Community Night Out, which I think is an awesome event. But that's what I like to see.
Okay.
More trees. More tree planting.
More trees, yeah, of course.
And
More
and
trees.
maintenance of our trees.
I just had one
Donald.
more thing, y'all. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, and I was
Niti
thinking
say,
about what Mr. Haight said yesterday in our council meeting, and I do agree, like with the mayor's sentiments that she expressed, that folks do a lot with communication, given with working within the confines of which we have to. But I think if we could, going back to like one of the positions that was in our referendum around another communications person to help accentuate all of the work that we already do, and maybe like have a dedicated person to work with, because I remember we floated around like the Alder blogs, like through the city website and some of the other things that folks could interface with us through, but we just don't have we don't want to strain staff any further than we already do. But I think if we had some more communications and could do that, I think would be great with all of the things that we're already doing, just so folks who don't feel that we don't communicate with the individuals that are in the city.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll add a few more boring ones for good measure. More finance help, so that the cities aren't doing finance work, like the public works department's not doing budgeting, but we're doing that in the finance department, taking some of that work out. I think we could probably use more admin help across the board and city staff to kind of like let our experts do expert work and then let the admin work that experts typically are not good at. I don't know how many of you tried to print a name tag or something. I've done that. It's very hard. Admins are very good at it, and more admin help would always be good. And then I think more HR staff. I just can't believe we have so few HR staff, given how we basically are constantly hiring. We have such a huge staff. It's shocking to me that we have so few HR, especially given how complex hiring is for some of these, especially the police department, but some of the other departments as well. So more HR staff would be helpful. All the boring stuff is important too.
Okay.
Can I do one more fun one?
Yeah, you can. So that money is not an issue.
Yeah, I mean, money is not an issue, right? One of my favorite, I don't know if anybody's been there, one of my favorite places in this whole area is Pope Farm Park in Middleton. I don't know if people have been there.
Which one?
Got a bunch of sunflowers.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
the
yeah,
sunflower
yeah.
park that everyone goes and
Yeah,
takes
I got
pictures
you,
at.
yeah.
Something in that vein, which is a park that is dedicated to nature and conservancy. I mean, we have so much rural area in the city that could, at some point, be conserved in that way. They still grow crops in that park, and it's a beautiful place, and it overlooks, the bluff. I mean, I love that place, and so something like that would be wonderful.
Yeah, you can talk to your Ag and Rural Affairs Committee.
Yeah, I mean, it was a large donation of land that led to that, I believe. So,
Okay, anything else?
Well, that was fun.
Okay. I will add, particularly in my case, I would like to see more like a downtown area for the city. Wait, but it's not an issue. And then eventually I would like to have you mentioned about community place that represent us, who we are as a city, and I would like to create the agricultural museum one day. That one will be my project after.
maybe we can put it in my park.
Oh yeah.
That my conservancy that I'm creating.
We could even call that. We could even call it the Terra Vesta Ag Park.
Oh yeah. Oh, we have the land.
Ag Park and Museum.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, that's it. Thank you, guys.
All right.
For dreaming.
We are at the end of our agenda item, which was wonderful. Thanks so much for all the great engagement there. Next, we have announcements. Our next Committee of the Whole meeting is September 23rd, 2026. But I'm also going to take this opportunity to remind the council what I mentioned last night, in that our November meeting is the day before Thanksgiving. which is going to be very challenging for me to make, and I'm sure other people as well. And I would like to move that meeting. I think there are several options. We could look at the week prior, November 18, or we could push the meeting into December, which would be because we do not have a committee of the whole meeting scheduled in December, given the fact that it bumps up against the holiday season. So we could look at December 2nd or December 9th. December 9th would be the day after the council meeting on December 8th. So if anyone has a strong opposition to any of those dates that I potentially am looking at, that would be November 18, December 2nd, or December 9th. So keeping it at Wednesday at 6:30, but just not the 25th of November when it's the day before Thanksgiving. Please either speak now or send me an email to let me know. If I hear nothing, I will assume that I can choose a date at will. And I'm going to talk to FACTv first, though.
Okay.
I will speak now. I will be out of town the November 18th. Well, I'll be out of the country November 18th.
Okay.
And then I'll be coming back November 2nd, like that day. I mean, if flights are on time, I will be home.
I guess I have a slight preference for December 9th if FACTv is amenable to that
I was
date.
gonna say, yeah,
I'm going to be out.
that'd be my
I
preference
have
as well.
I have
December
a
9th
conf-
was my preference.
Mine too.
What,
Yeah.
9th?
9th.
I cannot make it. I
Number 9.
MPO Policy Board meets on the 2nd, so I wouldn't be able to make that. So the 9th would be my preference as well.
Sounds slight preference for the December 9th.
Yeah, no,
I'm seeing a yes from FACTv as well. Good. Okay, so tentatively December 9th, but I will send an announcement, and obviously it will
make
come
it.
out with the agenda as well. That is,
No
we are at
birthday
the
cake
end
for
of our
you.
agenda. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'm going to be in San
Second.
Diego.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:03 p.m. Thank you so much.